Hi, I'm Philip Anthony Albertelli, and this is The Week in Doubt, a podcast for, and I want to emphasize this, atheists, agnostics, and whoever. If you've only heard the last two episodes, you might think it's a podcast about Gamergate and gender issues. And with any luck, hopefully this will be the last of these episodes. I can't promise I'll never talk about feminism or gender issues again, but if I do, it will probably be in the same way I have in the past. You know, when addressing cases of religious exploitation or oppression like female genital mutilation or Mormon fundamentalists marrying off child brides to old men or things like that. But hopefully this will be the last of these Gamergate / MRA versus third wave feminist episodes. What I plan to do is read some responses to last week's episode, entitled appropriately enough, Fallout from the Gamergate episode, and discuss some further fallout, and then put this thing to bed, hopefully. Then I can get back to dissecting religious news stories and futilely questing after the meaning of life. And by the way, that intro music, that's a little ditty called Hell at Your Heels, another one from my band from years ago, from a demo we did called Hero Mode, and we named it Hero Mode because Hero Mode was our nickname for the feeling you got when you were rolling on MDMA, and you felt like you were really in the zone. I don't know if I should have admitted that on the air, but I just did. And the cover was this Aztec skull mask, this mask made out of actual human skull with kind of like pyrite eyes and a flint knife for a nose, crazy stuff. But a listener of the show just last night actually requested that I play more music on the show. So there you have it. I hope at least some of you guys are enjoying my old tunes. And if not, I apologize for the ear torture. Oh yeah, before we get started, I want to take care of some Patreon shoutouts. And I'm sure I've given one of you a shoutout before. I believe it was Tim Danaher or Dinar. And I remember the first time I gave you a shoutout, I was worried that I might be butchering your name. So I apologize once again for that. I hope at least one of my pronunciations was correct. And I'd also like to thank Mark Seafried. I hope to God. Yeah, I understand the irony, non-believer, saying hope to God. It's an expression, people. But I'd also like to thank Mark Seafried, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Your support means a great deal, and the fact that you guys care enough about the show to donate your hard-earned money, I can't really put into words how much it means to me. You know, I've said a million times on the show how basically I have two day jobs. Well, my main day job is I work construction with my family. I basically swing a hammer for a living, as well as carrying a lot of heavy objects from point A to point B in other sundry tasks. And then I also have a design degree. Why is someone with a graphic design degree still doing manual labor? I don't know. I'm still trying to get to the bottom of it. But anyway, I know what it's like to work and sweat for a living. And even doing graphic design, you know, even if you're just sitting at a desk doing a white-collar job or doing some kind of creative work, I still know the kind of mental energy, the time, effort, and commitment that goes into a job like that. So whether you're blue collar or white collar, I know that people work hard for their money, and the fact that you guys would give any of it to me to help keep the show going or to reward me because you're enjoying the content, it just, it means the world to me. So thank you guys. I did lose one Patreon contributor, but I'll get into that later. Or should I say one patron? It sounds funny. It kind of reminds me of Renaissance Italy, where rich families would commission artists. Like the Medici family has commissioned yet another episode of The Week in Doubt. It's strange. But anyway, thank you guys. But I have a few more well-deserved shout-outs to quickly take care of. I'd also like to thank friends of the show Crocoduck, The Mad Humanist, Russ Ray, and Kev the Infidel for offering me their support and friendship on Twitter. It's been kind of a turbulent week, and those guys helped to boost my morale a bit with their support and camaraderie. So thanks as usual, guys. Another listener sent me a very nice message, and she gave me permission to share it as long as I protect her anonymity, which I of course agreed to. And it's actually in response to those last two somewhat controversial episodes that I was just referring to. So I'll read that now. And so the person says, "Hi Phil, just catching up with your Gamergate episodes and sexism, etc. Thanks for having a stab at such a loaded topic. I have lots I want to say, but I won't waffle. The sad truth for so many women is that a lot of us have been groped, assaulted, or felt threatened by men. You never really feel safe. The other side of it is that there are also a lot of decent men like you out there who don't quite get how prevalent it is because you don't do it yourself. There are also hyper-vigilant women out there who misinterpret every little thing. Next time you see a thread on topics like domestic violence, watch how the comments deteriorate. The men's rights groups always get involved pointing out how women victimize men, and on it goes. I feel so frustrated that the root causes are not being addressed because people are not talking. We're yelling, misunderstanding, lacking empathy, and accusing instead. I hate it. I also want to comment on the swearing. We Australians are looser with our language as well. I reckon I hear the C word fairly regularly. And I should just interject for a moment to say that in last week's episode, I kind of digressed into this diatribe, this philosophical diatribe about the nature of swearing. And one of the words I talked about was the C word. And what led me into there was this whole discussion about sexism, and that there seem to be some guys on YouTube who have no problem hurling the C word at women. And then I went into the kind of language differences between the way the word is used in the US as opposed to the UK. So that's what she's referencing. Anyway, so to pick up, I also want to comment on the swearing. We Australians are looser with our language as well. I reckon I hear the C word fairly regularly. I do contracts admin for an American construction company, and on occasion I use it. My theory is if you have one, crude, but there you go. My female colleague and I use the word, and then I don't know if she meant to spell the actual word, but there was like a typo or autocorrect thing. But she says, as in C of a thing. We work with quite a few Americans as well, who are usually pretty shocked at how un-PC we seem to be. They leave here feeling somewhat liberated. Thank you again for bringing up the topic of sexism. It's not easy. Cheers. You can use my comments, not my name, though. I am not as brave as you yet, and as we say here, have a good weekend. Well, that was cool, and it definitely it cheered me up to get that, because I've kind of caught some flack because of these last two episodes, and it's nice to get some kind of positive female feedback. Yeah, and I was feeling kind of down because, I mentioned losing a Patreon supporter. That wasn't the reason why I was down. But the person in question was a valued listener and someone I considered an online friend. So I was kind of bummed out. And so it was really cool to hear from this other listener who happens to be, female, and they seem to have a fairly positive reaction. Yeah, but anyway, so the listener that I lost, as I said, it's safe to say they weren't just a listener, but I considered them a friend as well. And I'm going to respect their wishes by not reading what should I call it, farewell letter, or maybe the internet equivalent of a Dear John letter. But they're a person that I interacted with a lot online. They were always offering praise and positive feedback, but apparently they were kind of turned off by the two Gamergate episodes. And according to them, they felt like our points of view on feminism were divergent enough or far enough apart that they felt like they could no longer listen to the show. And shortly after I received that message, they were gone from the FB page and also gone from the list of friends on my personal Facebook page. I don't know if they deleted their account or blocked me. Who knows? The result is kind of the same. They're gone, you know? But it was a bummer, man, to use us. Is that like 60s lingo, I guess? Even though we had never met in person, I considered them a good online friend, and all of a sudden, bang, they're gone. I don't mean to give them a hard time because I know they're a good person, but I felt like, man, it was kind of overkill. Do you have to disappear from Facebook? Can't we still be friends, you know? And I don't even know if I should go down this road because I don't want to insult anyone else. But it's just a brief digression on listeners who like my personal Facebook page. I've had a few listeners send me friend requests instead of simply liking the Week in Doubt Facebook page. And you know, it's like I hate saying no to people. I don't like rejecting people. So I'll generally say yes. And, you know, because I'm thankful that they care enough about the show or me as a host that they want to, you know, friend me or whatever. But I do have to admit, I do usually feel like a little vulnerable at first when someone I don't really know sends a friend request. Because even though I share a lot about my life on the show, my personal Facebook page, you know, it has pictures of me, friends, family. It's where I interact with friends and family, as well as just about every person I've ever gone to high school with. But, so you know, there's not really much anonymity on Facebook anyway, so it's probably not hurting much. But first, like, I do feel a little kind of vulnerable, not to be melodramatic about it. But for those of you guys out there, and I'm not going to mention anyone's name, please don't take this personally. And if you are one of those listeners who's now a friend of mine on my personal Facebook page, I don't want you to feel guilty. I don't want you to feel bad. I don't want you to leave. I'm glad you guys are there. You guys have been great, and you've proven that there's nothing to worry about. And I now consider you guys friends, and I'm glad that you're on there. But one thing that I kind of took is like an insult, I guess, in the case of this one listener who, you know, dropped me and the show, is that, you know, I took the chance because I wanted to be polite to accept your friend request and kind of allow you into my little world, into that private world, a semi-private world that is my Facebook page, you know, that where I interact with friends and family. And as soon as our opinions differ a little in, you know, 2 episodes, you just have no problem dropping me and, you know, bailing as a friend from my personal Facebook page after I was kind of good enough to accept you in the first place, even though, like I just explained, I sometimes, you know, it can be a little wary when someone that I don't know sends a personal friend request. But if this is your first time listening, you might be thinking, oh my God, what did he say that was so bad? Is he some kind of misogynist or rabid men's rights activist? Well, no. Up until I did those last 2 episodes, or around that time, I was relatively ignorant about things like the men's rights movement, Gamergate, Tumblr feminists, etc. And the reason I was talking about this stuff is because I was doing an episode on atheist infighting. And one of the hot spots for online atheist infighting is free thought blogs, where there's a large feminist presence. And there's also some overlap with Gamergate, so that's why I was talking about all that stuff. But I was trying to run over the last 2 episodes in my head and think, what did I say that was so offensive? And I was thinking, well, let's put everything into 2 columns. What did I say that could be interpreted as being misogynistic or anti-feminist? In the negative column, I ribbed Rebecca Watson a little over Elevator Gate. Well, in fairness to me, I admitted that my disdain was more of her attitude after the fact, not her initial reaction to the event. And I said that she had every right to feel intimidated or put off by the incident. But I did kind of rib her a little because her personality sometimes rubs me the wrong way. But I didn't invalidate her initial reaction of feeling put off by what she experienced. Let's see. Secondly, I disagreed with Anita Sarkeesian. Well, in part at least. I admitted that there are some games that seem to objectify women, but that on the other hand, there's a lot of games that have strong female characters. I think this may be where the listener I lost had some difference of opinion. I voiced my opinion that I didn't think there was anything wrong with sexy female characters as long as they were still depicted as strong and independent. But I think the listener still took issue with what she saw as the hypersexualization of female characters in games. I hope that's not the reason she left. Who cares if we have a difference of opinion on the appropriateness of how fictional characters are attired? It's not worth ending a friendship, even an online friendship, over, in my opinion. It seems to be a kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater approach. I didn't agree with Christopher Hitchens' support of the Iraq War, but he's still one of my favorite people, one of my personal intellectual heroes. And let's not forget, Hitch also once got into trouble for saying that he thought women weren't as funny as men. Something else I don't necessarily agree with. I have male friends who seem to have no sense of humor, and I have female friends who are really fun and irreverent, and, we get each other's sense of humor. And male or female, one of my favorite people is Sarah Silverman. But anyway, does that mean all atheist women have to stop admiring Christopher Hitchens as an otherwise gifted writer, orator, and proponent of atheism? Do we have to go through our music libraries and get rid of the work of any artist who ever said anything in their songs that contradicts our personal ideologies? Do we have to go through our DVD libraries and throw out any Hollywood movie that shows a little cleavage or a woman wearing a tight outfit? I'm also a Sam Harris fan, but I don't always agree 100% with his views on Islam. Does that mean I have to stop being a Sam Harris fan, even though I still think he's brilliant and has a lot to say about religion and consciousness and quote-unquote spirituality, etc.? I mean, once again, I really don't understand the throwing the baby out with the bathwater approach. If you count specials and things like that, I've published over 160 episodes, and only in 2 of those do I discuss gender issues. This being the 3rd. Is it worth giving up on the show because I veered into uncomfortable territory in a couple of episodes? I mean, we're all free to listen or not listen to whatever we want. I don't want people listening if they've lost interest or something like that. But we're talking about someone who is regularly interacting with me and offering me positive feedback, as recent as maybe literally a day or 2 before they pulled the plug. But anyway, back to that column list. So, ribbed Rebecca Watson, disagreed with Sarkeesian, specifically regarding Bayonetta. What else? I went off on a tongue-in-cheek diatribe on swearing, specifically the so-called C word, as I mentioned earlier. It was kind of irreverent, but I said that I would never call a woman that word, and I offered some philosophical musings on maybe why that word and some others are considered bad. Let's see. In the positive column, I mentioned numerous times that I believe women deserve equality and deserve to be treated with just as much respect as you'd give any man. I also stated that I thought men's rights activists, which I am not one, can sometimes come off as, and I'm not trying to make some gross generalization, but at least some that I've listened to on or watched on YouTube, can sometimes come off as being kind of bitter, cold, even borderline extreme at times. And I even spent maybe 5 or 10 minutes denouncing victim blaming in regard to rape. So I'm just not seeing it. I guess, I tried to be fair. Maybe I'm not a free thought blog / anti-Gamergate style feminist, but I'm for universal human rights. I'm very sympathetic to women's rights and women's causes, and I believe women deserve the utmost respect. So where did I go wrong? I don't know. But I guess whenever you lose a friend or part ways with someone, there is a sense of loss, but oh well, And in fairness to them, who knows, maybe they had other stuff going on in their life. And it's probably been a while since I've gone through one of these episodes, but I can remember when I was much younger, probably like in my teens, sometimes I would feel just kind of like emotionally overwhelmed, or I had a lot going on, and I would kind of hit a breaking point where I wanted a clean slate. So, it might be, I might dress differently, I might cut my hair, I might start hanging around with different people. All as if trying to reinvent or escape myself or something like that. Just trying to start with a blank slate. Maybe that was kind of it too. Maybe they just, they're going through a lot and they just wanted to, pull the plug on their internet presence or something like that. I don't know. But like I said, out of respect for them, I'm not going to read the correspondence. But they did pretty directly say that they didn't think they could continue to listen to the show, and I'm paraphrasing, because of our differences in regards to feminism, or our views of feminism. So that seems pretty specific. So it's one of those things you're probably getting sick of hearing me talk about it, but I'm still just kind of shaking my head, trying to figure it all out. I'm like, okay, I believe in equality for women. I have the utmost respect for women. I think rape is probably, if not the most serious crime you can commit, probably the second, right after murder. I remember when I was younger, I used to say I thought it was worse than murder in a way, because you left the victim having to deal with what they went through for the rest of their life. But now as an older adult, I think, well, at least the person still has their life, and at least their loved ones still have that person. But I still think it's one of the most serious crimes there are. And even though I said they still have their life, it's a life that can often end up being shattered, and takes a lot of hard work to try to piece back together. So, respect for women, equality for women. I don't have any tolerance for rape apologists. I denounced victim blaming. The only places where we might really differ is that I think it's all right to tease Rebecca Watson a little, and I don't mind sexy video game characters. Well, maybe they took my teasing of Rebecca Watson as a minimizing of how girls feel, of how threatened girls can feel in certain situations. And I think that letter from the listener, or that message from the listener I read at the top of the show, maybe kind of shines some more light on that for me, as they were saying that even if you're a good guy, or maybe because you're a good guy, you can't really understand how threatened women sometimes feel, because you don't go around subjecting them to the type of harassment that they would, receive from other guys, perhaps. So maybe she thought I downplayed what Rebecca Watson went through, and that offended her. But in fairness to me, during that first episode that I discussed Rebecca Watson, I said I could, I'm paraphrasing myself, I could empathize or sympathize with what she went through. And I said it's not just a female thing, that guys can feel threatened or intimidated or feel vulnerable sometimes. And I brought up some of my own experiences, like one time when I was in the city late at night, trying to, leaving a party or whatever. I was in Boston, and I was trying to find my car, and it was probably like 3 in the morning or something like that. And there was like a group of like these big, they kind of looked like college athletes, like they all looked like they were probably like, oh, I'm like 5'10". They looked like they were probably over 6 feet, pretty well built. It looked like they were probably athletes and drunk out of their skulls really loud. And they came towards me wanting directions, slurring and stuff. And on the surface, I didn't freak out and go running. I was just like, hey, yeah, what you need, But inside, I was like, oh, shit, here I am, one guy, and there's like 6 big, drunken, like college ball players or something coming at me, So I can understand that people would feel vulnerable in certain situations, especially late at night when you're by yourself. And once again, I did say that I thought she had a right to feel intimidated and put off by the experience. And if you're not familiar with Gamergate, basically she was at kind of like this atheist or skeptic kind of convention. And I think one of the guys from a crowd of people from the convention that she was with that had all been drinking at a bar after the convention followed her into an elevator and asked her out. Basically said, please don't take this the wrong way, but I think you're very interesting. Would you like to come back to my hotel room for coffee? And she basically kind of looked into the camera and kind of chidingly said, guys, don't do that. And so that's kind of what I took issue with, but I'm willing to do a mea culpa. Maybe I didn't take into consideration, really, even though I tried to, just how intimidated a woman might feel by a guy in a kind of closed-in space like that. And I shouldn't use this as an excuse or a justification, but I just didn't like something about Rebecca Watson rubbed me the wrong way, and I thought she was maybe a little full of herself. So I just basically joked, I ribbed her a little, even though I felt a little, what's the word I should use, naughty? I really don't use naughty in my regular life, but even though, I got kind of a naughty thrill out of ribbing her because I didn't really care for her attitude or the way she came across. But, and you guys are probably really sick of hearing this, I know I'm being redundant, but I didn't have a problem with her being intimidated or bothered by the initial incident. So maybe that's my crime. Either liking sexy video game characters or teasing Rebecca Watson. And the thing with sexy video game characters, I don't really go to like comic book conventions or anything like that, but I do know enough about them that one of the staples of these kind of con events, is women dressed up as their favorite sexy video game or comic book characters. Yeah, and I know some of the women there who are dressed in sexy costumes are there representing vendors, but a good deal of them are, I guess what I'd call, for lack of a better term, fangirls who are really into certain characters. So obviously not all women have a problem with kind of sexy female characters. And like I said, I'm not a woman, but as someone who I think is somewhat sympathetic to women's causes and their goals, I hope that I think the important thing is that the characters are independent and strong, in that they're not depicted as punching bags or as, completely helpless or something like that. And I also, I kind of criticized Anita Sarkeesian for criticizing one of my favorite game franchises, Bayonetta, or more specifically the character of Bayonetta, who I think is a hypersexual character, but is also a very strong female character. And the funny thing is, the only time you really ever see Bayonetta up close is during the cutscenes. Other than that, the Bayonetta games like Devil May Cry are these kind of 3D platform hack and slash hybrids where your character appears very small on the screen, so it's not like you're sitting there ogling, the character as you're playing the game or something. And then I remember the person also said something to me about how, how would you feel if male characters were constantly displayed as half naked or with bulges or with skin-tight outfit. And I'm like, that is gaming. I'm like, another one of my favorite game franchises is God of War. And I feel like such a nerd talking about all this stuff, but a lot of you listening are probably familiar with the God of War games, where you play as this warrior, Kratos, and it's kind of a fictionalized take on ancient Greece. And your character is basically this huge, muscular man wearing a loincloth and covered in nothing else but the ashes of his dead family and some war paint. And how many games are there, or how many male game characters are there, or male comic book characters who appear to be wearing some kind of tight-fitting, like spandex costumes that could never possibly fit that tightly in real life? And I think I was recently watching a YouTube video where they were talking about this controversy. I don't know how long ago this was, but over a Spider-Woman comic, the cover that was done by a famous Italian artist. And Spider-Woman was on all fours, kind of crouching like a spider. And people got all up in arms, thinking that the pose was too suggestive, that her uniform was too tight. And then they juxtaposed it with other Spider-Man covers, where Spider-Man is usually always depicted as having a visible bulge in his crotch, wearing an impossibly tight, skin-tight suit, and also crouched on all fours with his butt kind of up in the air. You know what I mean? So, and I don't know, maybe you might say, well, it's worse for women because women are sexually objectified more. Men don't mind as much or something weird like that. You know what I mean? I don't know. Is there some truth to that? Maybe. But once again, maybe this is another thing that offended the listener. But in last week's episode, when talking about Sarkeesian's criticism of Bayonetta, I said how there is this weird, almost Catholic or puritanical approach that you do sometimes see coming from radical feminists, where they're supposed to be pro-women and hopefully pro the female body and against body shaming, and against the shaming of whether it be a realistic version of a female body or a more idealized hourglass version of a female body, that, you would hope that as feminists, they wouldn't think that depicting the female body is bad, or that depicting female sexiness is bad. And yet you have people criticizing female comic book characters, female video game characters, no matter how strong or fierce or independent they are, based on their clothing. And it almost seems like a throwback to the idea of shaming women for how they dress or for how much skin they show, even though these are fictionalized characters we're talking about. And like I said, there seem to be plenty of women who don't share that view and who actually, enjoy these kind of depictions to the point where they cosplay as these characters and dress like them at conventions. So, once again, I don't get it. I'm for female equality. I'm for women's rights. But I like sexy video game characters, or at least I don't mind them. And maybe I was a little too hard on Rebecca Watson. Is that worth losing, even an online friendship over? Is it worth pulling the plug on a podcast that you enjoyed for like 158 episodes before that, or whatever, how many of them ever you listened to? And so this whole topic was supposed to be like a blip on the radar. I was going to talk about it only in passing as it related to atheist infighting. I was going to put a bow on it and go back to the usual format. This was just supposed to be another passing topic. And here we are, Do I sound pissed? I don't know. Hopefully, even when I'm pissed, I still sound laid back. I don't know. But, and what I hate about this the most, really, is that before I researched all this stuff for that episode, which I entitled Gamergate and Atheist Infighting, I believe. Before that, I never really thought about gender issues, except in a very general sense, that I had this almost innate sense of fairness, that I thought people, despite gender or color, ethnicity, creed, deserved basic human rights and deserved equality and to be treated fairly and with respect. And other than the fact that I'm attracted to females, I never went around denigrating females. I never, like I said, other than the fact I find them attractive, I never went around looking at them as the other or looking at them as something different from myself. I looked at them as people. And I think that there's this almost kind of West Side Story type of thing going on. Men versus women. MRA versus feminists. And I hate that. And it's why, even though I'm a staunch non-believer, from the outset of this podcast, I tried to voice my opinion that I don't like labels. If you press me into a corner, I'd probably say agnostic atheist. You know, one's a knowledge claim, one's a belief claim. Knowledge claim, I don't think, at least at this point in time, we can definitively prove whether or not there's a higher power. But I tend to doubt it personally because religions appear to be man-made, their supernatural claims can't be validated, and I don't see any empirical evidence for any particular deity. But I don't like necessarily labeling myself an atheist and seeing myself through that lens, because then I pigeonhole myself, I change the way I view myself, and change the way, potentially the way others view me too, and the way I view others. So I eschew labels for that reason. And I'm not the first. There's a lot of big-name atheists who have a problem with the label atheist. Daniel Dennett and Richard Dawkins have even proposed using the term bright, or brights, plural, which used to make Christopher Hitchens cringe and frankly makes me cringe as well. Sam Harris has talked about how he thinks the label is problematic in his view to some degree. Penn Jillette has spoken about the overlap between agnostic and atheist, those two terms. And so it's similar, and I want the facts and the truth to lead me, not blind devotion to an ideology. And so I don't want to be like sharks versus jets, atheists versus theists, men's rights activists versus feminists. I want to see us all as people and let common sense and decency hopefully lead us where we have to go. I was so close to swearing. Am I freaking crazy? Am I making sense? Okay. Whew. I need a drink, but still relatively early here in New England. And that reminds me, this show was supposed to be devoted to kind of terrorist incidents and scares in the Boston area. I'm in the greater Boston area. I was going to talk about my reaction to the Dzhokhar, whatever his name is, Tsarnaev death sentence. I was going to reflect back on the marathon bombing. And I was also going to talk about a recent episode we had in this area where, in the greater Boston area, where someone who had been on the terrorist watch list tried to attack cops with a combat knife, and they shot him to death. And he had plans originally to behead Pamela Geller. Remember I did that show about the attack on the Curtis Culwell Center where the controversial Draw Muhammad contest was being held, and she was the organizer. But the guy supposedly couldn't wait and wanted to behead police. So he supposedly, and I believe they've already showed the video to local Muslim leaders, and after the burial of the man with the knife, they're going to show the video to his family. But supposedly it depicts the man not shot in the back, as his brother tried to say, but the FBI and the local authorities wanted to question him. They had been watching him for a while, and he was a member of a local mosque. And they wanted to question him, but he turned around, supposedly drew a combat knife, started advancing on the cops, and they shot him dead. And it sounds cold, but as someone said on the Huffington Post in the comments section, better that he's shot dead than that he beheads a cop. And I agreed. And it actually reminded me of that horrific story in Britain. Remember about Lee Rigby, the soldier who got beheaded or partially beheaded by Muslim converts outside of a military barracks, and then they shot a video while their hands were still slick with his blood. Wow, between that and the stuff I just been talking about, my blood might actually be boiling. But I was going to devote this whole episode to that, and I was going to cover a whimsical story from the local, from this area too, where on the local news, there was a purported miracle where in a church, there was a painting of Jesus on a cross, and, you know, they show like blood running down the cross or whatever, and supposedly continuing almost, you know, in line with where the blood is depicted on the cross, is a brown streak on the wall. That sounds gross, but a long brown streak. And they're trying to pass it off as a miracle that, it's supposed to symbolize the blood almost continuing beyond the bottom of the painting. And as someone who does construction, at least in part for a living, what it looked like to me is water damage, the kind I've dealt with a lot while remodeling homes alongside my father and brother. But anyway, I haven't edited this down yet, but I'm already 50 minutes in. So what I think I'm going to do is read some YouTube feedback to last week's episode, and I don't think I'm going to get around to covering those Boston-related stories, unfortunately, at least not in detail, but at least I was able to give you a brief rundown of them. And no, it's funny, the last episode I put up on YouTube, episode 151, Fallout from the Gamergate episode, I actually wasn't able to monetize it, which isn't, a big deal, but it's because of what they call a third-party content match. And you don't get in trouble for it, knock on wood. You're just not allowed to monetize it. And it's an hour, 8-minute, and 38-second long video, but I think 1 minute and 30 seconds of it, I use a Sega trailer, the official trailer for the first Bayonetta game. So that, as I'm talking about Bayonetta, so they consider that a third-party content match. So the video's up, but I wasn't allowed to monetize it. And I wish they had more kind of human oversight, because I was thinking to myself, I'm like, really? It's a trailer for a video game which I love and I praise during the episode while I'm talking over it. And I'm thinking, in a way, this is like free advertisement for Sega. I mean, it's not like people are coming to my YouTube channel in droves, but still, in a way, it's someone praising their game and showing the trailer, which, if anything, you think might inspire people to want to go play the game for themselves. But I do have a slight correction to make that's pretty cool. I think last week or the week before I said that my YouTube channel had something like 160,000 views. That's actually the hits for my Podbean site where I host the feed for the show. The YouTube channel has 1,704,566 views. And I was like, I've never really looked at the number, and I was like, whoa. And but once again, I think most of those views are for like Bill Maher clips and clips of little excerpts from atheist debates and things like that. The lion's share of views isn't for my personal videos, but still, not too shabby, man. But it's funny, obviously I can't monetize those Bill Maher clips. They're just kind of there because I like them and they help draw eyes. But you can't monetize them. So I think to date, I have made a total of $17.90 off of YouTube. But I did receive some more comments, and I'll read some of them now. And someone named Cole Pram wrote that I'm in agreement with most of what Kevin Solway said. And Kevin Solway is someone who replied earlier, and I can't remember exactly what they said. Where I disagree, I do think Sarkeesian does receive misogynistic threats. There's a large audience out there, so it's inevitable someone who actually does hate women is going to take it out on her. That said, Kevin's right. Where I agree, Sarkeesian plays up the threats, and they put threats in quotes, she receives. She's become unchallengeable because she shuts off all discussion about her quote-unquote ideas, then only shows the extremely negative, uncivil, private comments she does receive. Much of it, I suspect, is because of frustration people experience for being told they're misogynist for liking something, but then not give any means to defend their positions. I think she's probably, I think he or she, they, trying to stay out of trouble, is probably referring to the fact that Anita Sarkeesian, I think, is notorious for not allowing comments on her videos. But anyway, the person continues, especially against someone that's given such a big platform in the media to present twisted misinformation supported with out-of-context cherry-picked data. As a feminist and Gamergate supporter, Sarkeesian and I have very different perspectives on what feminism is. To me, it's about giving individual choice to women and removing barriers so they can do things without being quote-unquote women, as the primary obstruction to their personal goals. Sarkeesian believes feminism is about women foregoing individual choices that advance them personally in favor of the quote-unquote collective. Prosperity of women in general. Basically, she's a dictator. Brianna Wu has admitted to using sock puppets and has been caught creating threads to harass herself. And then they go on to give a number of links to where there's supposedly proof or evidence that Brianna Wu has kind of used sock puppet accounts to, as they said, harass herself. Then further down, many of the people Gamergate criticizes, which includes more than just women, aren't squeaky clean innocent bystanders. Unfortunately, the press has the platform, so you're not going to hear about that. I hate that people seem to excuse women's bad behavior because of feminism, which should be just as much about holding women responsible for their decisions as it is about ensuring that they have the opportunity to make them. Sorry if you guys just heard little dings there. I think a friend was sending me a message. But I responded, hey, thank you for taking the time to leave such a thoughtful and well-worded response. I also appreciate you educating me on some of the finer points of Gamergate and the people involved. Smiley face emoticon. And then they replied, no problem, I enjoyed listening. And then someone named, is it Ian Davis? I'm subscribing. I like the cut of your jib. You must check out Sargon of Akkad and Mr. Medicare. Mr. Medicare? And I responded, hi, thanks for subscribing and for the compliment. I can't believe you used the phrase, I like the cut of your jib. I like to say that too. Picked it up a long time ago from an obscure source. And then I did colon followed by a capital P, tongue out emoticon. Oh, and if you guys are curious, the source where I learned I like the cut of your jib. This is an ancient show. I think I was like a little kid when it first came out or whatever. I don't know if I was a little kid, but I don't remember. There was a show called Northern Exposure. Now I can't remember if it was the late 80s or if it was the 90s. Maybe it was the 90s. I forget. I'm all messed up. But I started watching reruns of it on A&E probably back in my 20s at some point. But it's a show called Northern Exposure, and it's one of my favorite TV shows of all time. It is amazing. If you watch it, you might not think so. And one of the main people behind it, I forget his name, but was the guy behind The Sopranos. He has an Italian name, I forget. But it's basically about this little town called Sicily, Alaska. And it almost reminds me of a more quote-unquote spiritual and more positive or uplifting, like Twin Peaks. It's this little town where all weird stuff happens, but it's a really kind of positive and thought-provoking. And I hate using the word spiritual because I'm a non-believer, and that automatically puts the wrong idea into people's heads. By spiritual, I mean quote-unquote transcendent, moving, things that lift you out of the normal mode of, perception or whatever. But, yeah, so it's about like a young Jewish doctor named Joel Fleischman, and he doesn't want to be in this small Alaskan town. He'd rather be in the city, but he's stuck there. And he's got a really grounded kind of urban worldview, and he's surrounded by a bunch of eccentric people. A lot of them are kind of like Inuits or, Alaskan natives and things like that. And it's just a great show with a bunch. It's really quirky and eccentric. There's a bunch of like great literary references and things like that. And one of my favorite parts of the show is that there's like this charismatic young ex-con who's like never went to school, but he's brilliant and very well read. And he is always bettering himself by, reading and stuff like that. And he hosts a radio show on the local station in this small little Alaskan town. And he's always kind of offering these kind of like philosophical insights and pearls of wisdom. And he's always reading like these moving excerpts from works of literature. And the name of the show is Chris in the Morning. And I forget the character's last name, but the character's name is Chris. And it's actually, now I forget, this sucks, man, what's happening to my memory. And I actually forget the actor's name, but I think he was the boyfriend or the fiance from My Big Fat Greek Wedding. John Corbett, that's his name. And he played Chris Stevens. And on Wikipedia, they describe his character as a philosophical ex-convict who works as the disc jockey at KBHR 570 AM. Between songs, Chris offers comments on events in Sicily and more intellectual subjects, and occasionally functions as a non-denominational pastor at weddings. And then there's Rob Morrow, who plays Dr. Joel Fleischman. Joel is a Jewish physician and the proverbial fish out of water from New York City. Fresh out of family medicine residency, he arrives at the remote Alaskan town of Sicily, contractually bound to practice for 4 years to repay a student loan. And then speaking of feminism, there's a strong female character on Northern Exposure. Janine Turner. It's kind of a shame. I mean, I'm not, once again, baby with the bathwater. Janine Turner has now become like an extreme conservative family values person. She sometimes appears on Fox News. But she played Maggie O'Connell, a tomboyish Grosse Pointe debutante turned Alaskan bush pilot who develops a love-hate relationship with Joel. The character of Maggie O'Connell was inspired by the real-life aviator Nora O'Neill, who wrote the book Flying Tigress about her experiences flying in the Alaskan bush in the 1970s. And then it's funny, there's an elderly store clerk who's actually an atheist on the show, and it's in retrospect that's kind of funny. And the show does often deal with like existential issues, and I think they toy around with atheism a number of times on the show. One of my favorite things, I remember the scene sticks in my head where Joel Fleischman is at some kind of, I think at like a family event or something with Maggie O'Connell, and the like family priest is there, and they're like in a buffet line or something talking, and the priest is kind of insecure, and he's talking about, what happens when you die and all this stuff. And just very nonchalantly, Joel Fleischman, the Jewish physician, says something like, nothing happens. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle on your snout. But it's a great show, and whether you're like a non-believer or you're a highly quote-unquote spiritual person, because it also deals with a lot of like native spirituality and stuff like that. Just an amazing show, and I haven't done a recommendation in a long time, but that show is just phenomenal, and now this makes me want to get out all the DVDs. And I should state, it says here on Wikipedia that it originally began airing in 1990. It ran from 1990 to 1995. So I wasn't a little kid. I would have been in my teens. And that gives you some insight to how old I am. And I can't help myself. One of my favorite characters on the show, actor Darren E. Burrows plays Ed Chigliak, a mild-mannered half-native Alaskan foundling, raised by local Klingits. Ed does odd jobs for Maurice and works part-time at the local general store. He is a film buff and would-be movie director. And that's another thing. There's all sorts of, like, references to, like, artistic film directors and stuff, like Fellini. Great show, though. Anyway, I'll continue. Now, I'm actually starting to be in a good mood. All this Northern Exposure talk is calming me down. I'm returning to my mellow self. But I'll continue with the comments. Oh, and now here's a negative comment. Now I'm going to get all pissed again. No, someone, I didn't even get this before. I think their handle is supposed to be a play on words for Ace Ventura. Ace V. Chura. And they write Tildeer, T-L semicolon D-R. Literally too long, didn't read, first hit on Google Urban Dictionary. I think that's their way of kind of passive-aggressively chastising me for not knowing what Tildeer meant. I mentioned how there was kind of this men's rights YouTube personality who calls himself Tildeer, and I said I wasn't sure what it was an abbreviation for, but that the guy kind of cleverly does a play on it where his mascot is a teal deer, a bluish-green deer. But so this person is kind of like, the feeling I get is they're saying, hey, dummy, it's the first hit on Google Urban Dictionary. Too long, didn't read. TLDR. Okay, I get it. That was nice, though. I gave the guy a thumbs up. Okay, now here's one that might drag us back into the whole gender schism thing again. Someone named AllieDoc11, and their avatar shows someone's feet in heels with toe polish, I think. So I'm going to guess they're a woman if that's not wildly inappropriate. And this has to do with someone I actually liked, a commenter, still like, I shouldn't use past tense, a commenter from the original Gamergate episode named Ziffelmeyer, who was very nice to me and left a very positive comment. And when I was thanking them for their comment and reading it online last week, I guessed that they were a female, just going by context clues or whatever. And I admit that probably wasn't right of me, just because they describe themselves as a feminist, or just because they use like words like shush, which I didn't consider to be masculine, doesn't mean that they're not perhaps a man. And perhaps it was crappy of me to jump to conclusions and guess that they're female when they may not be. But this YouTuber seems to take offense to the way I handled it. Regarding the first comment, Ziffelmeyer's, that you addressed, I'd like to ask you why the gender of the commenter was important to you. Would a comment's meaning depend upon the gender of its asker? And were you aware that you were even doing that? Just an honest question. It struck me as odd. Okay, and so I actually find that, maybe I'm interpreting wrong. God, who I don't think exists, knows that I've been misinterpreting things recently, like my friend the Mad Humanist's take on the Gamergate episode and things like that. So now I'm questioning myself. But I get the feeling it's a little passive-aggressive. They're saying just an honest question, but it feels like to me they're kind of shivving me a little in the ribs, saying, hey, you know, why did you... or slapping me on the snout, saying, why did you, inquire or guess that person's gender? Was that necessary? Hey, it's rude. Or like they think it's kind of politically incorrect or something. And I responded, hey, thanks for the comment/question. No, honestly, the commenter's gender doesn't matter to me. Other than being a distinguishing characteristic, I don't measure a person's worth based on their gender. I guess you could argue that the person's gender might be a point of interest because of the nature of the topics. Gamergate, feminism versus MRM, etc. But all in all, I think you're right. I could have done without guessing at their gender, not just because it was unnecessary, but because I may have risked offending them by guessing incorrectly. No harm intended. In my mind, it was on par with innocently guessing if a person was Italian, like me, even though I'm a blonde, pale Italian, part Irish too, based on the sound of their last name. Thanks again, peace. Smiley face emoticon. All right. Then I did post the audio from a clip of Bill Maher talking to Ayaan Ali on a recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher. And I got some comments on that. And it's got 5 thumbs up or 5 likes, no thumbs down. That's a relief. And only one person commented, and they say, I like much of what Ayaan Ali has to say, just as I like much of what Bill Maher has to say. On many subjects, that said, and, or that sounded kind of odd the way I read it, on many subjects. That said, in a 2007 interview with Reason magazine, Ali said that there could only be positive changes if Islam is defeated. The magazine asked in a follow-up question, "Don't you mean defeating radical Islam?" She responded, "No, Islam, period. I think that we are at war with Islam, and there's no middle ground in wars." Defeat Islam? How do you do that exactly? And then he embeds a link. One of her suggestions is that we should send Christian evangelists into Muslim countries to convert Muslims to Christianity. And then I replied, "Thanks for your thoughtful comment and for the links. I recently saw Cenk Uyghur's video regarding Ayaan. He mentioned that comment about defeating Islam too. Thanks for providing the source. I wasn't sure where it came from. I think being able to admit you're torn shows maturity on your part. There's a number of people I admire who've said things I don't necessarily agree with, but I try not to throw the baby out with the bathwater if I can." Oh, and how prophetic was that after this episode? Yeah, but if she really did say we should send Christian evangelists over there, I wouldn't wish Christian evangelists on anyone. But maybe on radical Muslims, that might be a fitting punishment. And I have heard that supposedly she said some kind of extreme things regarding Islam as a whole. And I kind of cut her slack on that because of everything she's been through, or being subjected to being subjected to female genital mutilation. Here I am. I said at the beginning of the show that I might in the future talk about female genital mutilation. You know, that sometimes I might still talk about gender issues if it's something that ties into religion or oppression of women or something like that. So I cut her some slack in that department, and she has said things to the contrary also. I've heard her say in a fairly recent interview that you can't bomb bad ideas out of people's heads. I paraphrase, but I think that's pretty close to what she said, and that we need more reformers, etc. So it could be that this is a kind of evolving stance, you know, and that maybe she's become a little bit more lenient in her views as the years have passed. And now, oh God, I'm so tired. I was almost tempted to start slogging my way down a giant tangent or diatribe on Islam and whether or not we should condemn the religion as a whole. And as I've said a million times on the show, you know, I can find things I like about just about any religion. But I don't like fundamentalism. I'm intellectually offended by people who believe in the supernatural claims of man-made religions, literally. I don't think that creationism and prayer should be brought into schools. I think we need to vigilantly guard the separation of church and state, all that type of stuff. But people are free to believe whatever they want as long as they're not radicals, as long as they're not trying to behead people, even if their holy texts do contains some ugly things. There's a lot of ugly stuff in the Old Testament. There's a lot of ugly stuff in the Quran, as well as there's some inspirational and poetic stuff in the Old Testament. There's some inspirational and poetic stuff in the Quran. There's all the genocides in the Old Testament. There's the cutting off the heads and fingertips of the infidel in the Quran. And just like the Old Testament contradicts itself, the Quran contradicts itself on its stance on Jews and quote-unquote people of the book. At some points it talks about how you should protect the people of the book. Other times it talks about Jews as the enemy. But as long as you're not spreading hate and fundamentalism and extremism, have fun. You know what I mean? So I don't think any religion needs to be gotten rid of as a whole. Just the hurtful and extremist components of it need to be gotten rid of. And that goes for goofy religions like, Scientology. I really wouldn't mind if Scientology was gone completely. Just because it's so cult-like, it's so ridiculous. Its existence is an insult to human intelligence. It was literally created by a science fiction author. The way it bullies its adherents, etc. But at least Scientologists aren't beheading people. I'll give them that. And even like Mormonism, which I think is another relatively young and ridiculous religion. The whole thing with a known con man, Joseph Smith, finding these golden plates in upstate New York, getting his hands on old Egyptian papyri and trying to pass them off as something known as the Book of Abraham. Making the very insulting claim that Native Americans are actually, a lost tribe of Israel and all this offensive crap. But as long as people aren't marrying off young girls to old men or bullying people who leave their fundamentalist sects, I don't care if you want to be a Mormon. I like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. I have a weird Christmas music fetish. Not a fetish. I think it's an innocent love of Christmas music. But it's kind of funny. I keep Christmas music on my iPhone all year round. So sometimes I'll be in my car and I'll hit shuffle, and you'll hear some really crazy heavy metal song followed by Enya's version of Silent Night or something. But anyway, I think that's it for this week. It's been a wild adventure. It's been an emotional roller coaster for me. I'm sad I lost that one listener, but hey, what are you gonna do? I've still got all you guys. I have all the regular supporters, Russ Ray, John Haas, Crocoduck, the Mad Humanist, Kev the Infidel, and of course, my patrons. Did that sound a little bit like a Morton Joe? I saw Mad Max Fury Road. Yeah, but I've got Tim Danaher or Dinar. Sorry if I offended you by mispronouncing your name. And Mark Seafried. I must be pronouncing that right, I hope. It almost sounds like Siegfried, the Norse hero. Yeah, but I think that whole talk about Northern Exposure cheered me up. I'm feeling pretty good now. Maybe I'll watch some Northern Exposure and have a rum and coke. But you guys know the drill. You can like the show on Facebook. Please do. Come in droves to the Facebook page and make up for that like I lost. You can follow the show on Twitter. You can review the show or rate it on iTunes. You can go to Podbean, that's Podbean, to find all the archives going all the way back to episode 1, the Phantom Menace. Was episode 1 the Phantom Menace? I don't remember now. I'm in a really goofy mood now. And speaking of that, I don't know why my feed on iTunes only seems to go back so far when all the episodes from the start of the show are available on Podbean, the place where I host my feed. But you can go to Podbean and just do a search for Pal Bertelli, P for Phil or Philip, and then Albertelli, so Palbertelli, or simply do a search for The Week in Doubt. There's also a PayPal widget if you want to donate to the show as little as 99 cents. If you want to also become a Patreon supporter, just go to Patreon and look for Phil Albertelli or The Week in Doubt. You can also listen to the show on Stitcher. Did I say that funny? Stitcher. I'm in a really weird mood. I think I'm feeling good because I feel like I've had some kind of weird... I've undergone some kind of catharsis, and I was feeling down, and now I'm feeling good, so I'm a little hyper. As hyper as a laid-back, droning, neurotic New Englander can be. Maybe one day I'll do a podcast in my unbridled New England accent where I don't round off any of my R's. But anyway, I think that does it. So thank all you guys. I love you guys for all the ongoing support and for listening and all that jazz. And until next week, and I'll leave you with a little bit more of Hell at Your Heels. All right, peace out.
Yeah, so be the last time.